Hello, everybody. Up one last second adjustment of the camera. Okay, so hello, everybody. It's Saturday night at 10 o'clock. I am Chris Weave. I have with me, as I frequently have, but not all the time, Patrick Doyle. Hey, Pat, how are you?
Hey, how's it going? Hi, Chris.
So,
hi, everybody. I haven't been here in a while, so good to be back.
Pat's been out like flying airplanes and working and stuff like that. So how's that going for you?
Well, I'm still here, so
got that going. You were in like Norway, right?
I was in Norway for several weeks and doing stuff, and it was good. I like Norway. I highly recommend going to Norway.
Did it snow while you were in Norway?
It did not. It merely rained. It was in the 50s and 60s in October when I was there.
But you know where it snowed today?
It snowed on you.
Yeah. I got snowed on. I looked outside. So
let's be honest. You haven't been outside yet, have you?
I said I looked outside.
Okay. Oh, okay. Well, you said all right.
Yeah, I looked outside.
I said you said you got snowed on. So.
Oh yeah, that's true. I didn't really get. I mean, it was sort of the collective we, right? You know, my balcony got snowed on. I mean, and it was like, this wasn't like snow flurries. My dad in Iowa got snow flurries. This was like no shit snow. And the thing is, I'm right off of Interstate 70, so I'm probably, the vertical distance between Pat and I is probably 4 hours, because I'm about an hour south of I-80, and it's another 2 hours to get up to the Minneapolis, or at least another 2 hours. So when you add it all up, it's between 3 and 4 hours of vertical separation. So he's a lot farther north than I am, and I got snowed on. So, well,
yeah, but you're farther inland. You're farther away from a body of water. You get to have more extremes.
That's true. Although, you know, we're far enough away, we don't get lake effect snow. And basically Ohio has, as Pat knows, because Pat is actually from here. Pat is from Cincinnati, about an hour south of me. Not
really. I lived in Cincinnati for a couple of years. I grew up in Kansas, moved here in high school.
Okay. Yeah, you're right. I totally
lived in Cincinnati for a couple of years, but that's it.
Okay, that's true. For some reason, I always want to take Andy's background, substitute Cincinnati for Cleveland, and slap it on yours. So, but in any event, he lived here long enough to know that basically there's 3 different weather bands in Ohio. Down in the south, you more likely than not get rain. In the north, when you get close to the lake, you get snow, and lots of it because of lake effect snow. And then sort of in the middle, you get lots of you get sort of wintry mix, and you know, it could go either way.
Freezing rain, and that line just moves a little north or a little south all throughout the winter. Flying out of there was always very interesting.
Yeah, and so I'm kind of in the area where we're more likely to get rain than snow, but we do get snow fairly frequently. So
yeah.
So Stephen Ross points out it hasn't snowed in Canada yet. So, but in any event, tonight, let's see. I'm trying to think. There was something else I was going to talk about tonight, and I can't remember before we jumped into talking about Babylon 5, and I can't remember what it is right off the top of my head. Other than there will be a show next week. Pat won't be on it because Pat has to get up at like dark 30s to fly an airplane someplace.
3:45.
So
it's not to fly an airplane, it's just to sit in a simulator.
Oh, you should just stay up all night then.
Yeah, not happening. Not anymore.
Remember back when we were young enough that was actually a reasonable course of action? It's like,
even the staying up all night, though, remember, I still have to actually work and do a full shift. So, you know, I would have to stay up till, you know. Red
Bull. Just take a Red Bull. Or
that's a good point.
Yeah. I can't do that stuff anymore anyway.
No.
So, but
not happening.
Yeah. So in any event, next week it's just me. The week after that is the week after Thanksgiving, and it will be me and Pat, but it won't be any of the rest of you. because we're not doing a show. Pat and I are going to go to a science fiction convention along with Andy and Joelle Presby and some other people I know. So we're going to a little Relaxicon in Illinois and hang out together, but we're not actually going to do the show. And then we don't know whether Pat's going to be around for December. My expectation is that there won't be a show there on Christmas Eve, and there won't be a show on New Year's Eve. I'm pretty sure that on New Year's Eve, I'm going to be someplace else. I might very well be in DC for that, because that's traditionally where I go for New Year's Eve. But I figure Christmas Eve, that's not good. Bingo. Yep. That's it. Okay. Thank you very much. The other thing I wanted to bring up is that, so that is the book, The Dabari Snake Launchers, by our friend Joelle Presby. It's her first solo novel. It just came out from Baen Books, and it is really, really good. I shouldn't sound surprised. I'm not surprised.
No,
it's a good book.
Having worked with her and stuff too on this stuff sort of thing. Yeah, she is really good. You just read her posts and tweets or posts and stuff, and they're usually just clever.
Yeah. You know what actually surprised me about it? The thing that surprised me was the number of times I just laughed out loud. And the thing is, the book isn't a comedy. The book is about basically a industrial family in Africa, in Western Africa, that gets subcontracted to build the launcher on a local mountain that's going to launch supplies up to help them build the space elevator that they're going to hang down to Kilimanjaro. And the thing is that the family is, I shouldn't say dysfunctional, but I would say less than fully functional. And the things that caused me to laugh were just family interaction stuff. So.
Yeah. And I have not had a chance to finish it yet or anything like that, but I am very much looking forward to finishing it. And I think it's going to be a really fun book. So, and they, gosh, what was I had something brilliant to say, but I lost it. So I'll think of it again soon.
You haven't finished it yet?
No, not yet. Not yet.
Oh, okay.
So don't spoil it.
So don't tell you that Rose Bedwood is the name of the sled. So it's good. It's good. And I know that there's plans for.
Actually, I did remember what I was going to say. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Oh, go for it. Go for it.
Joelle actually lived in Africa, so she's familiar with a lot of what she talks about in the book. So anyways, like I said, so it's not just somebody living in a suburb who looked up Africa in a Wikipedia post and deemed themselves an expert on the sort of thing. She actually lived there and so she's going to know what she's speaking of and a lot of the cultural parts of it too. So
yeah, it takes place in Cameroon, which is exactly where she lived. She lived in, I think, like 3 different villages in Cameroon when she was a kid. Her parents were missionaries. She was born in France, but has no memory of it because her dad was in school at the time. And then he finished his program on how to be a missionary, and they went off to Africa. And I think she came back to Columbus when she was like 12, right?
I don't remember exactly.
11 or 12. Yeah. So she was there for like 10 or 12 years.
Yeah. And then she went to the Naval Academy. She was a nuclear power officer, just like Andy. And only she was a surface warfare officer, whereas he went subs. And she basically got a master's degree in how to kill submarines. And as she puts in her biography or in her little bio, sadly, none of America's enemies decided to go to war or launch a submarine campaign against the United States at the time. So she
stubbornly refused to
declare yes,
to declare war on the United States. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to what else I know that there are further books planned. What I don't understand, maybe this is a question I can ask her at the book signing I'm going to in Columbus on Thursday. I don't have a full. I know that there's future books planned in the series. I don't understand if we're going to see this particular set of characters again.
Yeah.
I don't know how far forward they're going to jump the timeline.
Yeah. So here it is. Here's the following graduation from the Naval Academy. She studied how to find and kill submarines at the Naval Postgraduate School and began dating a submarine officer. During her 6.5 years of naval service, nations with significant submarine fleets stubbornly refused to go to war with the United States. So anyways, that's a little sample. But anyways, fun book. I think everybody will enjoy it. It's by Baen Books, Baen. So go check it out if you get a chance. And then we're all going to be at ShambanaCon in Champaign-Urbana.
No, it's actually Normal.
Or Normal in Normal, Illinois. Yeah. It's called ShambanaCon in Normal, Illinois, the weekend after Thanksgiving. So
it has all the hallmarks of the sort of thing that was named after the place where somebody went to college and then they moved someplace else and took it with them. So for instance, there's a game company called the Blacksburg Tactical Research Center. It's nowhere near Blacksburg. It's actually much closer to Richmond. And and I think it's because Greg Porter, when he started the company, he was a student at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, but then he moved to Richmond.
Yep. Gotcha.
So, but there was a question that somebody else asked up here. Let's see. Let me find it again. Okay. I can't find it. I'll just say it. Logic's Finest asked, what's our general opinion of B5? Yep, here. So what are our thoughts on Babylon 5 as a series in general, and did I enjoy it? Yeah, this is going to be my third time all the way through, maybe fourth. I can't remember. I can't remember if it's my second time doing it at home or my third time. I think it's the third actually, but I haven't done it in about 15 years. So I'm looking forward to doing it all the way through. And I'm reminded, as I'm sure Pat would agree with me on this, it's a much different series when you've watched it all the way through and then you go back and you rewatch it. And instead of having to wait a week in between and not knowing what's important and what isn't, it's and then having these big breaks at the end of the year in between seasons. It's a much different series when you can just sort of like watch them all one right after another. And it's like, oh, wow, that's like really important. That looked like it was a throwaway line and it's actually really important.
Yeah, there's lots of those type of lines in there. I watched it all the way through last year sometime and always really enjoy it. So it had been about probably 10 years since I had gone through the whole series. So
yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, are we going to answer Logic's Finest question about that, or what do you? But yeah, like I said, overall we really like it.
Yeah, I thought we just did.
Yeah.
So we're going to go through and talk about it. We're going to talk about sort of the space combat aspects and stuff like that. I think its strengths are not how it does the military stuff per se. Its strengths are sort of the bigger picture stuff and some of the interpersonal stuff. I was telling Pat earlier that I think I was telling somebody that I talked to earlier today that one of the things that really sort of stood out in my head was some of the interpersonal stuff between Catherine Sakai and Michael O'Hare that we'll get to when we talk about Parliament of Dreams, and that JMS said on whatever Genie, I think is where he was posting, or maybe rec.arch.sf.babylon 5, about how those scenes were, he couldn't go to the rehearsals for them because those scenes were scenes that he had written based upon incidents in his own life. And as a result, it was way too raw for him. So he was able to write the scenes, but he wasn't able to watch people act them out, which I thought was very interesting. So I'm going to go ahead. I put together some slides. And so Like I say there, it's with some assistance from the Lurker's Guide to Babylon 5, which is the place where I fell in love with the internet, I think. And that the Lurker's Guide is just fantastic, and the site's still there. It's worth going and seeing if you haven't been there. It's a wonderful website, so go and check it out. Let's see. So I already talked about the schedule stuff here. We're already, let's see. Yeah, I think I covered everything in the schedule. So my plan is to be here on the 26th, the 3rd, the 10th, and the 17th. We know that there's no Pat next week on the 19th. We know there's no show after that. Pat's schedule is up in the air for the rest of the year after.
Quite literally.
Yeah, quite literally up in the air. Still want to do the Exordium book read along, but there's a couple of other things I've got on my queue first before I get to that. But I do intend to do that and start doing some presentations on that. I'm not quite where I want to be, where I wanted to be on the naval stuff I was doing, so I probably will do that first. But that's the plan. And then it still says first half of season 1 there, but we're going to do the rest of it. So the next, my expectation is the next time that Pat's on, we'll go ahead and do the second half of season 1, and then we'll probably start breaking it down into finer chunks. There was actually more sort of space combat stuff than I remembered in the first half of season 1, but it's still not quite everything, quite enough that I want to go episode by episode on. So, Pat, any thoughts on that?
No, the season 1, it's not till, what was it? Voices in the Wilderness.
Yeah.
Is there anything fairly, that one's, I thought, a pretty good one, but the special effects were fairly rudimentary at first and stuff in season 1. So it's not the strength of season 1. Season 1's mostly trying to lay a foundation overall. It's dropping hints that you're not going to pick up on until you've watched the whole series through a couple times. But there's very few throwaway lines in the show in season 1. So, but it does a good job of laying some groundwork. I've got some specific thoughts on a couple of the specific episodes that I was able to watch today. So, right. But we'll get to those in order.
Yeah, we'll get to those in order. So tonight the plan is we're going to go through The Gathering and everything through episode 10, which is Believers. So there are 22 episodes. Chris, why are you only going through episode 10? Well, first of all, we're doing episode 0, which was a 2-hour one. And there are 22 episodes plus episode 0, which takes it to 23 episodes. 2 of those episodes are part 1 and part 2. So I'm sort of counting them together, which takes us back down to 22. And when you start the counting at 0 and you want to do half of 22, you get to episode 10. And so we'll do 11 through 22 the next time, but keeping in mind that 2 of those episodes are actually, 18 and 19 are actually the same episode. So because of course I have to explain my methodology anytime I do anything, I have to go through and explain the methodology. So in case you all haven't figured it out, we're probably going to give a lot of spoilers. In fact, the entire idea behind this is that once you know where this show is going, it makes it interesting to go back and look at it, where you can sort of pull out all the foreshadowing. So I'm not going to feel bad about a show that is literally almost 30 years old. If you haven't watched it by now, it's not my fault if you're spoiled.
Or pause now.
Yeah.
Pause now and come back in about 60 hours.
Yeah. So it's, I say analytical constraints compared to Star Trek. And by that, I mean, we've got one show. It's got all the standard limitations of a TV show, in terms of it doesn't really have enough characters for what they're trying to do. And what do I mean by that? Well, what I mean by that is you've got, like, to start off with, Sinclair is both going to be both, and then later after that, Sheridan is going to be both the commander of the station and the lead diplomat. Okay, Babylon 5 has a population of 250,000. So he's basically the mayor of a town of 250,000 people that just happens to be a space station, so you can die a lot easier. And on top of that, he's got full-time duties as an ambassador with the other major powers in the galaxy. This is a workload that you should split between 3 people, right? There should be one guy who's sort of like responsible for being the facilities manager for the thing, another guy who's responsible for being the mayor and sort of maybe the commander of the station, and then a third person who's got the ambassadorial rank. The idea that they put them all together is kind of silly.
But budget cuts, apparently they could only afford an 05. They couldn't even put an 06 in charge.
Well, we actually get that. We don't get that in the first 10, but we get at least part of the reason why.
Yeah.
Well, we get half the story, but we don't get the other part that that really should be there. We know why it was Sinclair. What we don't understand is why they didn't say, okay, he's in this senior billet, we should at least make him an 06, right? Mm-hmm. It wouldn't be the first time somebody got either permanently promoted or a brevet promotion up to the position, so they had the authority, they had the weight of gold on their collar to do what they really needed to do. And you see that in gold or silver on their collar. You see that in it used to be, there was a time period in the United States Navy where the senior rank in the entire Navy was Rear Admiral, and you would get brevet promotions up when you were doing particular jobs. But then when you moved out of that job, you'd go back to being a 1-star or a 2-star. You go back to being a Rear Admiral. So like Vice Admiral didn't become a permanent rank until like right before World War I, maybe. So it was kind of weird. So there's a couple of things that they might have done that they didn't. One of the things that really also stood out is just the number of actors that are not around anymore from that show. I mean, on the one hand, it's been 30 years, and this isn't a complete list. I'm not including people like W. Morgan Shepherd, who's since passed away, and Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. and a few other people who just came in and did an episode or two or something like that. Like the guy who played Zathras, Tim Choate, he died at like age 24 in a motorcycle crash or something like that. No, maybe he was 24 when he did the show and he died at like 30 or something. In any event, he died way too young. But Mira Furlan, I think, was 66. Of the other ones that died, the oldest was, I think, 60. 60 was a particularly prominent year. A lot of these people died when they were 60. And Biggs was 44 when he died. So
was it the food on the set, or?
No, I mean, they all died way afterwards. Nobody died on the show.
In an old uranium, they did the filming in an old uranium mine or something. Yeah. I mean, geez.
So that's a reference to John Wayne made a movie called The Conqueror where he played Genghis Khan. Settle up, Mongols. We're gonna go riding. It's a horrible movie. It's absolutely horrible. But they wanted this particular color clay to film in, so they trucked in loads of dirt that it turns out came from the atomic test site.
Oh, good. Yay.
And the cancer rates among that crew were very high. Very high. So, but back to the analytical constraints. Star Trek has a lot of secondary sources. There's a lot of people that have done a lot of speculation. There are secondary sources for Babylon 5, but they're not nearly as prevalent. so there's just less material to go and look for good ideas in. There's just not as much stuff along those lines. So okay, so the gathering starts off. What I'm doing is the LG is the Lurker's Guide, so I'm doing the little summary from the Lurker's Guide. I put that up to sort of anchor everybody as to what episode we're talking about. So this is in the gathering. The Vorlon ambassador Kosh is nearly killed by an assassin shortly after arriving at the station, and Commander Sinclair is the prime suspect. And I've got this photo here. It shows Laurel Takashima, Lita Alexander, and Dr. Benjamin Kyle. What's notable about that photo, Pat? None of those people made it into the series.
Correct.
Now, Lita Alexander eventually comes back. I don't know the story about why Benjamin Kyle's character went away. I believe with Laurel Takashima that the network didn't like her. With Lita Alexander, I believe they offered Pat Tallman a role, and she turned it down, and then came back later when Talia Winters went away. There are two different versions of this. I thought I was watching the 1993 version. It turns out I was actually watching the 1998 version. I don't have a list of the changes, although I think if you go to the Lurker's Guide, when they talk about stuff, I believe they've marked the place where there are changes, but I'm not real sure what the list of changes are. But there in terms of changes between what we see in the series and what we see in the pilot. So Sinclair has a different love interest. I like Catherine Sakai better than I did Carolyn. What's her name? Laurel Takashima leaves. Benjamin Kyle leaves. Lita Alexander leaves. There's personnel changes all over the place. You've also got Ed Wasser plays a tech on the control center. Ed Wasser is the guy who later played Morden in the show himself, but he's playing an entirely different character who's in the background on the show and has a bunch of speaking lines, but he's just another guy in the bridge. I found it interesting that at the very end, Sinclair has to explain to Delenn the concept of poets and poetry. And then in episode 7, we find out she has a good friend who is a famous Minbari poet, who she's known forever and ever and ever. So they didn't quite have their sea legs underneath them at this point. Their continuity was a little off at this point, I think. We don't see a whole lot of combat stuff in this. I don't think do we see Raiders at all in this episode? I don't think we see Raiders in this episode.
No, I don't think so. It's it's more of a whodunit sort of thing.
Yeah, and we do see a Vorlon fleet come in and start charging their weapons and stuff. It's sort of interesting the response that the Vorlons have, given that I think they know who Sinclair is and all the rest of it. I kind of get the impression that the Vorlons understand the entire Sinclair going back in time, and he's going to do that piece. I could be wrong about that. So it sort of begs the question of why are they trying to sort of junk up the works by going in and doing what they do.
Bluff?
Could be. I mean, maybe it's all for show.
Yeah.
Maybe it's all for show.
Yep.
So, but we also see that the hand weapons look substantially different. They went from one set of goofy hand weapons, I would argue, to another set of goofy hand weapons. I never liked the weapons that they used during the series. I thought they were comically small and not as practical as they could be. So,
yeah.
So, any other thoughts on this one, Pat?
No, not really. I thought if you go back and rewatch it, I think the 1998 version, they cleaned things up a little bit. It holds up a little bit better they did more sound work and stuff. I don't remember all the changes they made, but it's still worth a watch. It's not fantastic, but it provides a little bit of background and stuff.
It was also interesting, they changed the makeup on Delenn.
Yeah, she was,
With the exception of Lita Alexander, the female characters were wearing a lot less lipstick, I noticed.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they also changed Jakar's costume and or makeup some too. I didn't sit down and sort of put them side by side, but I just kept having this feeling that they had changed something there, and I'm not quite sure.
Yeah. There are a lot of visual differences and such. The uniforms are different. Like you said, the weapons are different. Yeah. None of it's really too much of a deal breaker. I mean, most sci-fi shows don't have things figured out for the first few episodes anyways, sometimes the first season. So
Olive says Olive says Jakar's makeup changed too, and I think Londo's.
Londo's makeup changed between season 1 and season 2. His hair went from kind of this real stringy thing to a little tighter. Got a better hairstylist, I think.
Logic's Finest asked the question, could the whole Sinclair being Valen thing, maybe it wasn't thought up yet? And so it's, the claim is that Straczynski had this plan all the way through and he was just executing the plan. The plan, from what I've seen, the documents on the plan, there's less to that plan. He had a plan all the way through. They called lots and lots of audibles. There were lots and lots of changes of the plan over time. It wasn't quite what the story makes it sound like, the tablets, he brought the tablets down from the mountain and then they did exactly that. And that's not what they did at all.
He had to improvise all the way through. Yeah.
Yeah. And I personally am of the opinion that there was some major shuffling. Like, I think we saw the series finale in the second season. Mm-hmm. Because of the situation with Michael O'Hare and his medical situation. So Michael O'Hare had some serious mental health issues and couldn't continue in the role. And I think that the entire bit with him going back in time and becoming Valen, I'm convinced that wasn't intended to be the middle of season 2, which I think is where they ended up showing it. I think that was intended to be like the final episode of the series where you were going to see how it all fits together or close to the end. And that's not what they ended up doing. So in any event, we should go to the next episode because we've got
So this one I thought was a pretty good introduction to the whole show. And I like it because, it kind of introduces the conflict between the Centauri and the Narn and stuff like that. And it really, it says in the, in this, that Jakar and Londo nearly come to blows. Really, I think this is the beginning of the tragic story arc of Londo. And this shows you, this is the foundation, I think, of that whole tragic story arc. Londo's story arc is very similar to the Centauri story arc strategically. So at least just my opinion, I'm not a drama critic, but the, Midnight on the Firing Line, you see that you've got the once mighty Centauri Republic, and they get to endure another humiliation at the hands of the Narn, who just a few years back, they were in control of. They owned them. They had their planet and everything like that. And the loss and humiliation of losing, was it Gorash, I think is the name of the system. No. It's not Gorash. That's a reference to a different one. But anyways, and so what that does is it gives ammunition to the, I don't know if the right term is reactionary, but the reactionary forces within Centauri Republic who want to reclaim the Republic's past glory. And so they see the loss at this as proof that the Emperor is weak, and they want to restore the Centauri Empire and the Centauri Republic to its past glory and stuff like that. And so, a few decades ago, Germany had a similar problem like that. So
yeah,
and that didn't turn out well for them either. And it certainly in the end does not turn out well for the Centauri Republic at all. At first, it looks like it's going great, but by the end, not so much.
yeah, and Londo's arc is very interesting. I mean, the interplay between Londo's arc and Jakar's arc.
Yeah, they're kind of opposite to some degree, or they're portrayed as opposite. And Londo is really, I mean, he's really one of my favorite characters. I mean, I really, and he's just kind of this likable buffoon at first, but for whatever his reasons are and motivations are, his demons, whatever, he makes a few choices that puts him irrevocably, him and the Centauri Republic on a bad path. So,
yeah.
So yeah, I really enjoyed this one.
Yeah, this is a good one. I never did figure out though. The Raiders come in and blow up the ship. It's some of the actions of the Raiders in the show don't make sense to me. It's like, what are they after, right? Why would you take out a ship and just destroy it when you could capture the ship and take it and sell it someplace else later, or chop it up for parts or whatever?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, perhaps fighters aren't the right tool for going after freighters and stuff like that. I mean, there should be a larger ship, maybe with a Marine force or a boarding party or something.
Yeah, and we seem to get hints of that, but it's like I never am able to try to figure out what the Raiders are attempting to accomplish, because they don't seem to be thinking like pirates. They seem to be thinking more like submarine raiders, right? They're trying.
Well, I mean, it presumably, I guess the only other thing just off the top of my head, it could be some form of, organization that is, maybe that some of those raiders represent competitors to those freighter lines and stuff like that, and they take.
Could be.
But I think you can look at those raiders as kind of the equivalent of, hey, I'm going to arm a small business jet with a couple cannons to shoot unarmed ships, but when up against mainline starfighters, they just get
that's definitely the case. But I mean, they blow up their targets. I may be putting too much on a line that Garibaldi had. Garibaldi said something to the effect of the ship has been stripped, but then when they show the ship is full of holes. And it's like, you can strip a ship and you can maybe like blow up what's left afterwards, but I don't quite understand. At this point, I don't understand what the Raiders are attempting to accomplish.
Oh, well, and perhaps we just don't see the couple shuttles that are coming in a few minutes after they disable the ship and stuff like that. Maybe we just don't see it.
No. I'm assuming that those shuttles are there. I don't understand why if they're taking anything, why don't they just steal the ship?
Yeah, well, maybe it's slow.
Could be.
What made it easy prey doesn't, is the same reason. And after you've damaged it, towing something is that much slower.
Could be. So. The other thing I don't understand is, why is Garibaldi flying a starfighter all the time?
Yeah, there is that. But
yeah. So okay. So let's assume for a second that at some point he was rated as a pilot, and that's what his job was in the Earth Force military.
But he was a ground pounder. They talk about that in his history too. So a lot of this doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But my question here: do we ever actually see Garibaldi participate in a dogfight or a battle? We see him fly it. That's
a good point. I don't think that we do.
Yeah. there could be different levels of qualification. Hey, you can act as a ferry pilot, you can shuttle around in it and stuff like that. But yeah, you're not part of the squadron.
As a general rule, whenever Star Furies are involved, I've got some questions, and some more of those are going to come on down the line. So, all right, let's talk about Soul Hunter. Delenn is in danger when a soul hunter, an alien who captures the souls of the dying, arrives at the station. So, the actor, incidentally, is W. Morgan Shepard. His son is Mark Shepard, who anybody who's a Doctor Who fan of the modern era will recognize Mark Shepard, or a Battlestar Galactica fan, because those were the two shows that he played the attorney on Battlestar Galactica. And so they're both English actors. W. Morgan Shepard passed away maybe 10 years ago, something like that. But Mark Shepard is still active.
There's one key point in here that they talk about, and that's that the Minbari have determined that souls are being reborn in human bodies, and that was one of the whole reasons for stopping the war. And because the Minbari had detected that the people of the newer generations, the younger generations, were never up to the same quality as earlier generations were. I think that that the Minbari have, I don't know how to put this, have made it part of, they have made the fact that the older generation always thinks the younger generation is stupid and feckless, and they've incorporated that into their religion.
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure the Grey Council thought that they should get off their lawn too.
Yep. There's a book I was reading. It's a fairly interesting book, and I'm just badly paraphrasing, but it's something like, the younger generation, they care nothing for tradition. They are, they speak disrespectfully. They're slovenly. They're lazy. They don't do anything.
Yeah.
And the quote was from Aristotle. So ever since I read that quote, whenever I listen to somebody, especially at my work, because we train 20-year-old people to fly airplanes. And so I hear sometimes people at my work going, these guys, they're just a bunch of entitled little, whatevers. And, and all this kind of stuff. A little bit lazy. They're not studying, whatever. And I always go right back to, that's what you've just proven you're old. Yeah, that's what every old person says about people 20 or 30 years younger than them, period. Everybody thinks they're better. Nope. You're just old, and get ready, because you're on your way out.
So the U.S. Navy once did a survey of the officer corps, and the response they got back from one particular segment of the officer corps said, my bosses are constantly on my back, and they really need to just turn me loose. And the people underneath me, I need to sort of keep my thumb on them to make sure that they don't actually get in trouble. Do you know what rank was it for the officers who said that?
Probably 04s.
All of them.
All of them. Yeah.
They all.
Yeah. That. Yep. People below me don't know what they're doing, but I need to be left free and clear to do what I need to do.
Yep. So there's some interesting things in this episode. The ones that came to my mind was, I understand why Sinclair would want to go out, and Bob made the comment that Garibaldi does it to get flight pay. I don't understand why Garibaldi qualifies for flight pay. I perfectly understand why he does it. I perfectly understand why Sinclair does it, because Sinclair is a pilot and he's got to get a certain number of hours in, or he doesn't get flight pay. And, he's a pilot. He likes flying. So he volunteers to do it. And, pilots understand this is how that works. What I don't understand is, in a situation where there's a ship on a collision course with the station, And oh, by the way, maybe you should point the jump gate just a little bit off to one side so that it's not directly aimed at the station or the planet. Maybe that would be good. But what I don't understand is why he's in the observation bubble, he's in control. There had to have been somebody who was closer to being able to get into a Star Fury and fly out there and do that.
Yeah, there had to be an Alert 15 guy just sitting around eating, drinking coffee in his cockpit.
Yeah, make that guy earn his paycheck. Make that guy earn his paycheck. And so, why only send one? Why only send a bunch of them? Yeah. So I don't. This is another instance. Whenever the Star Furies are involved, they do stuff in this show that doesn't seem to make sense to me. And I understand all the TV show reasons, like, Sinclair's the star. It's the same reason why Kirk kept beaming down to the planet with his entire command crew, right? Same sort of idea. We learn in this episode that souls are a thing and they can be moved around. And there's a couple of other episodes where we learn stuff like this. This is one of those episodes that appears to be a throwaway, but it's not. And then in addition to that, we have things like we learn about the existence of the Grey Council. We learn that Delenn is on it. Well, I guess we kind of knew that from the Gathering, but there's more about that. And at one point, the Soul Hunter is doing his thing with Delenn, and he picks up all the machinations going on in her head and says, "You would plan such a thing." So there's lots of interesting places where they do stuff like this. So any other final thoughts on this one?
Nah.
Okay. Born to the Purple. Londo's career is in jeopardy when a beautiful slave seduces him and steals a sensitive computer file. Garibaldi investigates an unauthorized use of a restricted communications channel. The subplot on the communications channel is kind of boring. Let's just talk about that or ignore that. It's got a couple of interesting little tidbits in it. This is where we hear the phrase Londo calls Veer a moon-faced assassin of joy, which is one of my all-time favorite Londoisms. And at some point, G'Kar says to Sinclair, "I never knew you could be so devious, Commander." Did G'Kar actually did he remember what happened in the pilot, where at the end of the pilot Sinclair gave him a drink and then told him that there was like a nano poison or something, like a nano tracker that was in it?
That was in Midnight on the Firing Line.
No. It was in the Gathering.
Was it?
I just watched it.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So but in any event, even if it was Midnight, it was the Gathering. But even if it was in Midnight, it was like it was in an earlier episode. It's I never knew you could be so devious. Really? So this is one of the things, and keep in mind, Babylon 5 is one of my all-time favorite shows. So this is really minor. But you see stuff like this show up. There's lines that show up that the line is great, and then you go like, yeah, but it's not consistent with what we've seen so far. Let's see. I don't think they ever got in any ships at any point during this episode. Mm-mm. So kind of boring. All right, we'll move on. So, Infection. This is an episode, an archaeologist smuggles alien artifacts onto the station, unleashing a living weapon. So, this is an interesting episode for a couple of reasons. I thought the first of which, in my mind, is that it is, I think, the first instance of a long-standing tradition in this show of having actors come back. The same actor who plays a human will come back with a whole bunch of makeup on, and so they end up playing multiple roles in the show.
Yeah, you can recognize with some practice, you can recognize the same character or the same actor who plays a variety of characters throughout the series. So.
Yeah, and you've got it in a couple of instances. So this is oh shit, now I'm totally drawing a blank on his name. He's the guy who plays Talon.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So he plays the samurai Narn later.
Oh, yeah. Now I see it. All right. I
Yeah.
see it in that picture. Cool.
And I can't Marshall Teague. So Marshall Teague both plays Nelson Drake in this episode, who gets turned into the living weapon, and then he later plays a Narn. John Vickery shows up as a human, and then he I think it's later on he ends up playing a Minbari. And he comes back several times as the Minbari. I think he's only on there once as the human. Wayne Alexander is in there for a bunch of instances. He plays Sebastian in Comes the Inquisitor, and he also plays Lorien.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I want to say there's one or two other actors who show up, sometimes wearing a lot of prosthetics, and et cetera, and other times they play a human. This seems to be a recurring thing on this show. Star Trek did it too. This show seems to do it an awful lot. I did think at the end that it kind of felt like an original series Star Trek episode at the end, as Sinclair is trying to use logic to cause the living weapon to sort of effectively self-destruct. Right?
Yeah.
Well, how many times did we see Kirk have to do that?
Yeah. You were if you allowed Kirk to talk to you, you were always doomed.
Yeah. First thing, gag
Whether
Kirk.
you're Khan, doesn't matter who you are. You should just keep smashing the fire button until Enterprise blows up. But once you open up communications to gloat, yeah, Kirk just won.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I don't think, as much as I love J. Michael Straczynski, I don't think when Sinclair does this, I don't think he's as articulate as with the words they put in Kirk's mouth. I don't think it works as well.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it works as well. But it is interesting that we've got the organic technology. It is interesting seeing the scanner that they have, because there are instances where the scanners don't seem to be, the last episode they could have used a magic scanner and they didn't. And this one, they sort of he puts it down on the scanner plate, and next thing you know, it's like telling him about it's organic technology. It's got capillaries. It's got this, it's got the other thing, et cetera, et cetera. And that basically, it's just like, okay, in this one, they've got something close to a magic scanner.
Yeah.
So within
what's the next one?
Next one, The Parliament of Dreams, which may be my favorite episode from season 1, and maybe it's one of my all-time favorite episodes in the series, and I had sort of forgotten how good it is. Sinclair's old flame, Catherine Sakai, who replaced that Carolyn chick, arrives during a week-long festival when humans and aliens demonstrate their religious beliefs, and old enemy sends an assassin to kill Jakar. So, first time we see the Toth. She replaces the aide that Jakar had for the last couple of episodes. First time we see Lanier, he shows up. The Centauri have a household god named Morgoth, which is the first of many Tolkien references that we see in this show. In fact, I remember I was on a mailing list where somebody on this science fiction mailing list said, this show is totally unique. There's nothing like it. Everything is, he just sort of thought all this stuff up. And a bunch of us said, have you read Tolkien? You haven't read Tolkien, have you? And he went, no, why? And we said, take us from us old guys, because we were like 30 at the time. Take us from us old guys. Before you say that again, you really need to read Tolkien, because there's an awful lot of Tolkien references in Babylon 5. So,
actually, one of my favorite scenes in The Martian, also the movie The Martian, where they're having their little meeting, and the public affairs lady, she doesn't know what they're talking about, but they're all they've all given each other names. And what was the council?
The Council of Elrond.
Yeah, Council of Elrond, and everyone picks names that they want to be, and she doesn't know what they're talking about.
Oh, and you know what? Of course, makes that so fantastic. Makes it especially fantastic.
Uh-uh.
Sean Bean.
Oh yeah.
You know,
Was he in the movies?
in the Lord of the Rings?
Yeah.
You mean Boromir?
Okay, sure. It's been 20 years since
Yeah,
I've seen
yeah.
Lord of the Rings,
So his character at one point is talking about a scene from a movie that he was in.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
That's up there with in Bridget Jones' Diary, where you had Colin Firth playing a character called Mr. Darcy. When he played Mr. Darcy in Pride and Prejudice, the BBC Pride and Prejudice show. But
okay, gotcha. Cool.
So you see a lot. So first of all, one of the things that makes this just a fantastic episode in my mind is the depth of the relationship between Sinclair and Catherine Sakai, which I think they described it as 3 parts passion, 2 parts teeth. Because they fight a lot and stuff, but they really love each other. And you sort of see where it was going to go, right? You know, it's clear to me that if O'Hara hadn't left the show, Sinclair would have had the Sheridan arc, and it would have been Catherine Sakai that would have been taken by the Shadows, which would have made it a lot more.
Yeah, because she was kind of an explorer type out there and stuff.
Yeah.
Like that. Yep. Yeah, I think you're right.
And think of how gut-wrenching that would have been, because with Melissa Gilbert's character, it's like, okay, yeah, got it. So
it's just a guest character, just popped in.
Yeah, you know,
we hadn't had time to get to know her.
We presume that he loves his wife a lot. Got it. Yeah. We got it. But you know, this would have been a character that we would have seen that relationship, and she would have been one of our characters, not just this guest star that came in that week. So this is the place where, like, if they actually end up redoing this show, if they end up rebooting it, one of the things that I'm really hoping for is that the next time when they reboot it, he tells the story where Sinclair is there the entire way through, and the ending of the series happens at the end of the series, and Catherine Sakai is a character that we've all fallen in love with, and then she's turned to the dark side, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I mean, it could just end up being that it's a totally different story, totally unique story that just happens to be on a station called Babylon 5.
Could be.
Perhaps there's the same alien races, some of the same but I'm just speculating. I would love to see it if it happens. I don't know the status of the Babylon 5.
I don't either. I know that Warner Brothers got sold and everything.
And that screwed everything up. So.
That's true.
Actually, isn't it just that nobody returns from Zaha Doom? Anybody can just walk on in.
Well, same is true of Mordor.
Thanks, Stephen.
Somebody pointed out that at the Council of Elrond, there's only one person there who's actually been to Mordor previously, and it's Elrond, and he does not volunteer to go.
There might be reasons. All right. It is 10 o'clock now.
Yes. So we're cranking along.
What's that?
We're cranking along. We'll be done soon.
Okay.
We will. So, Mind War. Talia's old Psychor instructor, the victim of a secret experiment, is the target of a manhunt involving the Psychor. Catherine wants to survey a promising planet for possible mining, but Jakar warns her to stay away. This is the first episode with Bester. Also, just think, I put also there twice. I didn't mean to. Think about how this series would have changed if when Jason Ironheart vaporizes the other Psycop, he had vaporized Bester instead. Think about how much simpler their lives would be later on down the road. There's two what might have been setups here. First of all, you see the Catherine Sakai one we just talked about. You also see this what I think was the setup for Talia Winters to be the psyker who was responsible for making everything work at the end during the war. Because Ironheart gives her this special ability, and I could easily see, you then see in the next episode, I think it is, or one of the follow-on episodes where Kosh is sort of like probing her. And so it could easily have been Talia Winters had that role. You see that there's a Psychor conspiracy going on. There's a part of this recurring theme that you see here called Things Mankind Was Not Meant to Know. There's a lot of that in this show. And you also see Jakar's capable of not being a total dick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. He's got it in him.
Yeah. Yeah. So any other thoughts on this one?
No, not really. But it does introduce Walter Koenig, recurring character, great character everybody loves to hate. So love seeing him in the show.
Yeah, it was great seeing him in the show. It really was. So War Prayer, violent attack on a Minbari poet. Remember the poet? Minbaris don't understand poetry. Oh, but they have poets. Rocks B5 and leaves Sinclair scrambling to flesh out a vicious pro-Earth group. 2 star-crossed Centauri lovers seek Londo's protection. Ivanova is shaken when a man from her past arrives at the outpost. So the thing I found interesting is that it's a new episode and we find a new conspiracy. Or is it the same conspiracy as the last time? How many conspiracies are we at this point? We've got the conspiracy. We've got the Delenn conspiracy of the Battle of the Line and all the rest of that. By the way, I didn't talk about the battle line for the Gathering, but we'll talk about the Battle of the Line. I think it's the next episode. We've got the conspiracy with Psychor from the last episode. We've got this conspiracy, which may or may not be related to the conspiracy from Psychor. It's like every episode they have to come up with a new conspiracy.
Well, or they're all pieces of the same one that will, of course, all come into the same. They'll all link up eventually. Because I once had a doctor find out, just quick story. Had a doctor. It was getting a flight physical. I was in the Navy, and I don't speak for them, by the way. But at the end of the...
I totally forgot about that. I don't speak for them either.
Yeah, but you already wrote it on the first slide, so you're covered.
I did, but I feel bad that I didn't say it.
Anyways, speaking of conspiracies, so he then launches into... He asked me what I studied. I was a history major. Oh, then you must know about this, this, and this. And he then essentially held me hostage for the next 2 hours, and he linked together the Rockefellers and Area 51 and the alleged suicide of Admiral Forrestal, and you name every little tidbit of a conspiracy theory you can think of, and they were all linked in this Ruby Ridge. I mean, everything. It was all linked, all part of this grand, gigantic thing.
Yeah, that's not good.
So is this the one where Jakar got captured or, was going to be assassinated?
No, that was a couple of episodes back.
Okay, that was the previous one. Yeah. So let me just go back to the point in that earlier one where Jakar, there's an assassin out for Jakar, and eventually the assassin captures him, and the assassin's supposed to torture Jakar for a little bit. And we see it. And one of the things we see in there early on is that he really pisses off the assassin because he won't scream or cry out in agony as he's being tortured with the pain device and stuff. And we see that later on as part of Jakar's stubbornness. So I thought that was a good one. So
yeah, it is. I put in here, hey, anybody recognize the green thing? And I can't for the life of me remember what that's a reference to.
Oh, that's the reference to the thing I sent you, right?
Is that from this episode?
It is the War Prayer, 37 minutes in. Yes.
Oh, it is from this one. Okay, yeah. We'll get to that. Okay. I've got that. I couldn't fit the picture on this slide, so I put it down at the end. So.
Oh, okay.
Right. So that is it. All right. We'll talk about it down there.
All right. One more thing with the Worf. My favorite line in that movie is from Londo with there's two Centauri lovers who, want to get married for love and stuff. And Londo's take on marriage. What does love have to do with marriage?
Yeah.
But it's mostly the way he says it. But the Centauri, basically, I think the Centauri are one of the most advanced alien cultures of the 16th century. So,
yes, yeah, there's a lot of truth to that.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, and the sky full of stars. Sinclair is kidnapped and interrogated by members of a pro-Earth group determined to find out what transpired when the commander was briefly missing in action during the final battle of the Earth-Minbari War, something Sinclair has never been able to remember. Okay, so let's talk about the Earth-Minbari War for just a second. Is there any of their tactics that make any sense? We're just gonna like line up in a line and not let them through, and
yeah,
they're playing. Basically, they've decided that they're going to play Space Invaders with them as the role of the invaders, and the Minbari can just sort of come in and pick them off.
Well, so there is that, and I get it. I mean, I mean, they're outclassed. We don't get any real true detail on tactics or the planning or anything like that. I will say, if you go into the Agents of Gaming stuff and some of their scenario write-ups from the Earth-Minbari War, not saying I love the game or anything, but some of the scenario write-ups were actually good because it has the Earth generals and admirals and captains trying to come up with really clever tactics and plans and strategies. And in every case, they're just so badly outclassed. You know, it's still essentially people with spears coming up with clever tactics to attack a tank, and they just don't have any chance. You know, it's World War II fighters coming up with clever tactics and traps and everything like that for up against an F-35. So,
but the one thing that is being on the tactical defensive in a situation like that ain't going to work.
Sure, defensive warfare almost never works. Not as a strategic plan. But here's one thing that we do have an example of people who remained in formation, fighter pilots that remained in formation because that is what they were taught to do, to the tremendous detriment of themselves and the entire formation. And that's the Japanese in World War II.
Yeah, the Japanese attack formations, they'd stay in formation when the Americans would just come and start shooting them off, which is, yeah.
Now, presumably, you'd like to think we've learned a little more about aerial combat since then, and they'd be a little better at it. But the thing is that the one thing they point out is the Minbari had stealth technology. They never really knew where the Minbari were, and they could never get clean shots at them. So presumably the Minbari came out of nowhere frequently. So
it could be. It's just I've watched that stuff dozens of times, and I can't make heads or say I can't tell myself a story that makes sense.
They just don't go into it. I think it's just they're just terribly outclassed. Yeah, they're biplanes against late 1930s aircraft and stuff, which there were examples of that, right? I mean, in China was flying biplanes against Zeros, and they just got murdered, right? So it doesn't matter what clever thing they came up with or what tactics they were using; they were just outclassed.
The other thing that struck me about this is that all the security guys seem to be idiots. So the security guy who's under investigation, he's using his ID access card to get into spaces. He's telling the computer exactly where he is while he's doing stuff that he's trying to do surreptitiously while he's under.
Well, thankfully, lots of criminals are not always good at covering their tracks, right? I mean,
these guys are theoretically the guys catching the criminals.
Theoretically.
And the other thing is that there's this great scene where it's like, oh, no, Benson's got a big bank account. It's like, and Garibaldi looks at it and goes, yeah, as of 3 a.m. this morning when he got $15,000 and he paid off a whole bunch of debts in the last 10 hours. Don't you think that's a little suspicious? Oh, yeah, I guess it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so
yeah,
I guess Babylon 5 doesn't necessarily attract the A team.
Perhaps, but not everybody is the A team. You don't get your entire staff gets to be the A team. And remember, you're somebody who's worked in an office with a bunch of intelligence experts and stuff. Some of the rest of the world just scraping by.
Yeah, but the thing is that these guys are theoretically professional investigators, right? They're security people, right?
They're security people, not necessarily investigators. That's Garibaldi's thing. There are a lot. I guarantee you, there's lots of people who stand security. You know,
I would think that something like Babylon 5 would be closer to police officer than mall cop.
Maybe, but there's always a spectrum of capabilities in any job, right?
That's true.
Amongst special forces people, there are guys who go, "Oh yeah, that guy's a complete idiot," right? You think, "Ooh, Navy SEAL special forces or whatever, they're all these, real badasses," and maybe the worst of the SEAL is still pretty much a real badass, but on the scale of the people within that job, they go, "Yeah, he's not going to stick around very long."
Yeah. So. Okay, so the next one, second to last episode we're going to talk about tonight, and then I'll do a little closing. Deathwalker. The station becomes a hotbed of galactic controversy when Sinclair is forced to protect a notorious war criminal, a scientist who's invented an immortality serum. Ambassador Kosh hires telepath Talia Winters to oversee a very unusual negotiation. This is yet another Things That Man Was Not Meant to Know episode. I liked "We will meet in Red 3 at the hour of the scampering." That was a great line.
I took that to mean rush hour. Do you take that?
Yeah, I took that to mean rush hour too.
All right.
I love the line from Deathwalker. "The Windswords are right to fear you. They speak of you often." She said that to Sinclair.
Uh-huh.
But what I don't understand is, why did Deathwalker actually go to Babylon 5? I mean, I know she was going there to have a meeting with somebody. Why would you have the meeting on Babylon 5? If you're going to go meet with the Narn, why don't you go to the Narn homeworld?
Travel.
There's a whole bunch of alien races that really want to kill her. Let's maximize the number of different eyes that can see her. And oh, by the way, Kosh is a real dick in this episode.
What? Because he doesn't let us have immortality?
There's that part, but there's also just the way he treats Talia Winters.
Right. Well, I think. But I think he knows what Talia Winters is, right?
Yeah.
And Talia Winters is actually the dick, and he's figured it out, and he's just collecting info on her.
So Lissa, who's watching in the background, says Kosh is always a dick. Yeah, there's that. She's not wrong.
Look, there was so much that Kosh could have fucking stopped from happening, and he just chose to shut the fuck up and not do anything about. So yes, Kosh is always a.
Yeah, God allows for free will.
Kosh, I will say, one of my all-time favorite episodes is the Death of Kosh episode, and that scene was fantastic. So I'm looking forward to having that conversation.
What was it? What was the Garibaldi's line though? God's a con artist compared to the Vorlon, or something like that.
Yeah,
something.
I love this comment from Stephen Ross. Given what happens to Babylon 1 through 4, would you assign your best people?
Actually, clearly the best people are already gone.
Yeah, these are the ones that.
That's good. I like that, Stephen.
Let's see. There's some interesting conversation that takes place in this episode about how took place 30 years in the past. The war with the Dilgar took place 30 years in the past. The Dilgar were apparently a major power because they were conquering people left and right. And apparently Earth coming in on the side of the people that were being attacked was a significant factor, both in defeating the Dilgar and in the rise of Earth as a major power.
Yep.
And so I've always thought, I don't know if any of the supplementary materials really went into the Dilgar War at all in any depth.
I actually think I've got the Dilgar War thing from Agents of Gaming. I've got a bunch of the ships. I've got a bunch of the miniatures. So.
Okay. That might be worth looking at.
It goes through and tells the story. It's got scenarios for the Civil War. I mean, yeah, there's so much good information. So
even a broken clock is right twice a day.
Yeah.
Which really kind of describes
what I'm saying is Babylon 5 gives a lot of there's a lot of space there to come up with interesting stuff. So
I mean, for the record, I was one of the play testers for that game. And I seriously considered telling them to please replace my name with Alan Smithy in the rules. I decided not to because I wanted to be able to say, no, really, mine is an informed opinion about this piece of shit. If you look, I'm one of the play testers. So that's the only reason I didn't ask them to take my name out, because I wouldn't have wanted my name on the front cover of it. So let's see. Episode 10 is Believers. Dr. Franklin asks Sinclair to intermediate with an alien family who, because of their religious beliefs, refused to allow surgery that would save their dying child. The A-line story is not really the interesting one. I mean, it is a very interesting story. It's a very interesting moral dilemma. You certainly get to learn a lot about Stephen Franklin and how he approaches problems. The main thing, though, is I'm still trying to figure out what exactly industrial goo would be used for, and why does it have the properties that it does. Other than that, I find it interesting. They talk about sending a wing of fighters, and then they sent 2.
Yeah, the word would have been element.
Element would work, but I would have sent more, because you'll note that there was
what were they off to do? I don't remember that part of it.
There was the transport Asimov had a fire on its bridge and its navigational systems were out, and so they needed somebody to go out and lead them in, and they were in raider territory. So given how easy it is for fighters to do jumps, and given that there's raiders are all over the place, I don't understand why ships don't have escorts to begin with in that area. Secondly, I don't understand why you'd only send.
That's a resource allocation problem. You don't have enough. They don't have.
How many transports can you afford to lose?
Well, no. How many other jump lines? And it's not like there's just one.
Understood, but this seems to be a particular problem.
Yeah.
There seems to be this one area that's a particular problem, and they don't really seem to be doing. They seem to be constantly surprised. Oh, we got another one there, So I don't understand why they only sent out 2 fighters. I don't understand why at one point it's like, when they're talking about whether they're going to split up, it's like, well, we're still an hour away, and if they call for reinforcements, then we could be in trouble. It's like, why don't you call for reinforcements? Right? The reinforcements may be an hour away, but they can meet you part way, and then call for backup. I don't understand why they didn't call for backup. It just didn't make any sense to me. And we get another great line from Kosh. The avalanche has already started. It is too late for the pebbles to vote. So, yep. Any other thoughts on this episode?
No. Good moral dilemma type episode. So, but
yeah,
that's about it.
With a creepy ending.
Yes.
Okay, so here we go. So let's talk about the green thing. Pat sent this to me and said, look, something to the effect of, look what I saw in this episode. And he pointed me exactly to it. And I went and looked, and yeah. Anybody out there recognize that thing? So if I had been thinking, I would have taken.
You get to win. You get to be declared the winner of today's trivia contest. If you know what that is, we'll wait a few more seconds. But
yeah, because
I got any ideas.
I should have actually pulled down the picture. Nope, not Death Star.
Death Star. So you're in the same decade as far as sci-fi stuff goes.
Yeah. So
Yep.
Bob, yep.
Cylon, it's a
Okay,
Cylon
so
space star. All
That
right.
that is specifically the map, the board map of a Cylon base star from FASA's Battlestar Galactica game, circa what, 1980, 1979, something like that?
82, 83.
Okay.
Yeah. It's a 40-year-old game.
Yeah. And so they scanned it in and made it that puke green and just threw it up in the screen that Garibaldi, when they're trying to track down.
Yep. So
this was the episode where when Sinclair's been kidnapped.
Yeah. So in this, you moved your fighters around the hexes, and then right here, these hexagons right here are where you would put little fire markers. And once you had 5 fire markers, after you shoot your torpedoes into the base ship blows up and you win the game. Yeah. So, but it was kind of a fun early Starfighter combat game. It was part of my love of Starfighter combat games as a kid. So really enjoyed it. But yeah, that's what that's from. Was just so shocked when I saw that up there. I think I noticed it a couple years ago.
Yeah, I had never noticed that before. So we see.
This is one I'm comfortable saying, aside from the person who put it up there, I might be the only person who recognized it.
When you pointed it out to me, you may be the only person who noticed it, but when you pointed it out to me, I knew exactly what it was.
Yeah.
I went to the Board Game Geek to take a look at the image to confirm it, because my copy, I own that game, but my copy is in my storage unit.
Yeah.
I immediately went, that looks like the FASA base star.
It really is. So.
But yeah, that good eye. So, so let's see. So my summary of everything we've seen from the pilot through episode 10 is we see lots of fighters dealing with lots of raiders. We don't really see much else. Every now and then we see bigger ships come in. The Drazi comes in and threatens at one point in the Deathwalker episode, and these people come in and they threaten, and the Vorlons come in the pilot and they're threatening. And that, but in terms of actually, most of what we see with ships is starfighters or Star Furies going out and doing stuff. They've got a real counter piracy problem around there. I'm still not quite sure what the raiders are trying to do. I think maybe we figure out later on, we get more of a handle on what
we do. There is an episode that it shows the carrier and kind of what explains it a little bit better, I think.
Yeah, I seem to recall that as well.
Yeah.
One thing is that this only looks like the modern U.S. government and military. They use a lot of the same words, and the overall structure is largely familiar. Like it starts off with in Midnight in the Firing Line, they're having an election for the president, right? And they get election results reported in, just like we had a couple of days ago. From that standpoint, it seems very familiar, but there's lots of differences in the details. It's not clear to me whether those differences are intentional, first of all, and whether they had been really thought through. So you see some of those in the command structure in particular, like all throughout this series, they're talking to the senators, right? The commander of the station is talking to a senator and getting direction, getting guidance, sometimes even orders from the legislative branch people, not executive branch people. And this just is weird. It always struck me as funny. I think I said this earlier, that Sinclair is both the commander of the station and he's the lead diplomat. This is a really heavy workload. That should probably, there should be 3 people doing that. And so with stuff like that, I'm sure that part of that is just like you can't have a cast of 75 people and have things for everybody to do, right?
Right.
So you have to sort of consolidate things down, and it's hard enough in written fiction to have the number of people that would actually own part of the process in the real world. It's even harder on television. But it's still some of the things that we see, like it makes me wonder if there's an explanation as to why they're dealing with the Senate. That actually, in its own way, it really kind of feels like the Roman Republic in that regard. Because I believe that in that, I'm trying to remember whether the Senate actually would send notes to consuls in the field. I think they did, if I remember correctly. So that's kind of what I saw as a summary through it. Pat, what thoughts do you have on that?
Like I see overall, I see that season 1 is simply laying the groundwork for everything else that follows. It's just setting up the parts and pieces. Occasionally there's some B plot storylines that are, like, what is it? There's the boxer episode. There's the archaeology episode with the, the thing going around blowing things up and stuff like that. So there's a few of those things, but really they're setting up all of the elements, and you're seeing little pieces of the characters that are all going to be important, at least to the extent that that character made it through, all the real world stuff and was still an actor on the show. Years later. But
you see the absolutely critical relationship between Catherine Sakai and Jeffrey Sinclair. And it really, that one in particular, that Parliament of Dreams was just fantastic. It's a fantastic episode. JMS thought highly of it. And the part that just, that was going to be such an interesting relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. I did kind of like that because I went back and rewatched that episode today, and yeah, it would have been fun to see a little bit more of that because she was a good actress.
Yeah,
their chemistry was good, and it seemed like the Sinclair character or Michael O'Hare, he could be a little bit wooden at times, and I'm not much of an acting critic, but he seemed open up a little bit more. He was a little more expressive or something like that in the scenes with her.
His comment about being wooden, or Michael O'Hare's comment about being wooden as an actor, was that was intentional. He's playing a character who's missing a piece of himself.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
He's got a hole in his mind. Right.
Yeah.
And he was trying, and he was trying to sort of like internalize that by acting like he's not fully expressive, and he sort of intended where he was going to go with that.
And in all honesty, to be honest, it probably really was a little bit more of a realistic portrayal, I guess, because he's playing a guy who was a starfighter pilot, somebody who's supposed to be calm when people are shooting at you. So this day-to-day administrative stuff probably doesn't, isn't as exciting for him and stuff like that too. I know I can remember sitting in a particular military staff and looking at emails come in as people are flipping out about some administrative thing. And, oh my God, we got to get this out. What's going on? We're all going to die, kind of thing. And I remember to this moment still having consciously having the thought, like, I didn't get this excited when I saw red flashing lights in my airplane about a thing that was pumping engine hot air exhaust into my fuel tank as I'm rolling down the runway, and I'm getting triple chime warnings and stuff like that going down the runway. I didn't get this worked up when I thought my plane was on fire one time. So, it's just, so that's the kind of and clearly he has dealt with far worse things than anything I've ever dealt with. At least his character has.
Well,
So,
you see that in 2001. It was either Keir Dullea or the guy who, I can't remember the guy who played Frank Poole.
don't worry about it, but keep going.
Yeah, the two actors who played the two main actors who played the astronauts. One of them, they were doing some retrospective of it, 50 years later or whatever, and somebody said something about their their very low key performances, and it's like, and the response is, they're doing a deep space mission.
They're astronauts.
They're astronauts.
Yeah.
NASA is going to pick people who are low key and easy to get along with and imperturbable. That's part of their selection criteria.
Yeah, because I do remember watching, I think Katie Sackhoff was in it. It was a Netflix thing, crew put together to go fly out on a spaceship and save Earth. And yeah, it was, it was like a reality TV show.
It was a teen drama.
It was a teen drama. Yeah, it was just nothing but high schoolers on a spaceship.
I got through the second episode and it's like literally
couldn't go anymore.
Put up an hour of a picture of the spacecraft and let me stare at it for an hour and don't have any of this other shit, because the rest of it was garbage.
Yeah. I did not enjoy it.
I couldn't take it. I couldn't take it.
Yep.
But
that's not the kind of people you'd put in a military situation, let alone a astronaut.
Yeah, there's a YouTuber called Tom Scott, and at one point he does a thing about he did this Arctic tour, and I'll leave out all the details, but he ends up being Chris Hadfield's roommate for this 2-week Arctic tour. It's actually a really fascinating episode where he's telling the story to his buddy about how he ended up as Chris Hadfield's roommate. And he said, Hadfield every couple of days would just say, is there anything that I'm doing that you find annoying that you'd like me to stop? And it's like, no, you're fine. Okay. There's nothing that you're doing that's annoying me either. And it was clear, he was somebody who was used to being in close quarters with people, and and knew how to communicate it, and was very upfront about all that stuff, et cetera, and just and was entirely low key the entire time.
Because resentment builds up one brick at a time.
Yeah. So, well, I think that's it for me. How about for you?
Yep, I'm good.
Okay, so
thanks everybody. Thanks everybody. Appreciate you sticking around.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward. We'll do episodes 11 through 22. Remember, 18 and 19 are together. We'll do those episodes later on. Next time we're together, probably. My plan is to go ahead and do slides and go ahead and watch them right away. So I'm going to throw one last comment up from Logic's Finest here.
Yep.
Realistic military types don't make for exciting television. That's why a lot of fan fiction isn't good. It's real world realistic, but not very dramatic. I'm going to push back on this thought, because I think that the issue here is you need to be skilled at your craft in that regard. And so, yeah, I'm not saying that there isn't a lot of bad fanfic out there. There's lots of stuff that isn't fanfic, like that Katie Sackhoff show. I really like Katie Sackhoff, but that show was just horrible because nobody in it was realistic, and
it wasn't even good drama, though. In that particular case, in my opinion, was not good drama. Didn't enjoy it. But here's the other thing:
it substituted conflict for good writing.
Yeah, and
it's the Twilight approach.
And the other one is that it doesn't mean I was trying to advocate that everybody should be sort of a wooden performance, because that's realistic and that's what we're all like and all that kind of stuff. There's, I've been in the military. There's a whole variety of people. Some people are gregarious. Some people are, very quiet and low key and all that kind of stuff. However, there's still the whole variety and panoply of personalities and stuff like that. But, sometimes there can be the discipline and in theory, certain behaviors and stuff like that. So I'm just saying that for Sinclair, I can see that character being a little bit more calm and stuff like that, a lower key performance, and that's fine. So, but in the end, when his character's opening up to somebody, and he's being a little more expressive, he's a really likable character. But it's reserved only for certain people, I think, in the show, or for interactions with certain other characters like Garibaldi and stuff, or Catherine Sakai, his good friends. So.
Yeah, and there's one thing we didn't really highlight, which is that there's that episode. Because I didn't watch everything in order. I'm trying to remember where exactly it is. It's the episode with the and the Sky Full of Stars, I think it is. It's the one with where he's kidnapped, right? Where he sort of sees Delenn, right? He takes the hood off of her, sees Delenn, knows who she is, and he carries that memory with him when he gets out of it, and he's talking with her later, and he just tells her a bald-faced lie.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? It was pretty much justified because he realized that she'd been lying to him. And you sort of get the impression that he's thinking along the lines of she must have a good reason for it.
Or but maybe she's not the friend, you've got to also be thinking to yourself, she might not be the friend I think she is.
Yeah, and there's been times in my various day jobs where I've sort of said, okay, I'm going to file away that little piece of behavior. I can give them the benefit of the doubt, but that doesn't mean I have to trust them.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
I won't ascribe a motivation to what I just saw.
Yeah. Or
what's going on here. I'll figure that part out later. In the meantime, let me figure out how I can work with this person going forward.
Yep. I think I've been right more often than I've been wrong, using the saying, don't ascribe to malice, which you can ascribe to, thoughtlessness or stupidity, or there's variations on it and stuff like that. Yeah. Mostly people just aren't thinking about you. They're in their own little world, and thinking that their particular behavior has anything to do with you is sometimes a little presumptuous, I think.
There's a lot of truth to that. Everybody's got their
Every
own
situation's different, but that's my general default.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I think we're done.
All right then.
So for the record, I'm going to get back to what I do, what I spend 24/7 doing, which is not speaking for my employer. Because I didn't say that 4 times today, so I'm trying to meet my quota.
Yeah.
But we should do this again. And hey, let's get together in a couple of weeks in person.
Yeah. So Shambanicon, the weekend after in Normal, Illinois, we're going to be there at the convention. So come down and see us.
Yeah. And it's literally, it's a Relaxicon. It's got next to no programming. It's really just, and none of us have ever been there before. Joelle sort of found it, was going to go, and we just sort of went. I mean, literally, I will be driving within about 5 miles of that hotel on my way back to Dayton anyway. I go through Normal, Illinois all the time, going to and from my dad's house in Des Moines. And so the idea of like, oh yeah, I'll just leave town a couple of days early and stop off at a hotel and see my friends, that isn't that big a
So I'll bring some games and we'll sit down, have some beers, and have some fun. Looking forward to it. So,
I'm going to bring The Captain Is Dead. We need to play The Captain Is Dead.
Absolutely. I did learn how to play that. So that looked like a really fun game. So absolutely bring that. I'll bring Star Trek Ascendancy just on the off chance we have a little more time for something like that. So, and I'll be demoing Star Force Commander, the game I designed as well. I'll have some physical copies there with me too. So,
all right.
So all right.
Sounds like fun.
All right. Take care. See you, everybody.
Later, everybody.
Bye-bye.